very, very simple to do. So if you're ready, type in yes. Let me see it. And then we'll begin. All right. Excellent. Excellent. Keep it coming. Okay, and I want to confirm, let me confirm with Success Resources. Right now, you can hear me and see me, right, before I bring on John? You can hear and see me, yes? Someone from Success Resources, just type that in the chat. Okay, we have UK, we have Thailand, we have Algeria, the Netherlands. Keep them coming, keep them coming. Keep them coming. Singapore, Poland. Okay, great. That's all I need to see. All right, well, get ready because the chat's going to go crazy. John Gray, come on in. And formerly, we were just maybe 5 minutes apart. Now I've moved to I've moved to Scottsdale, and we're hundreds of miles apart, unfortunately. But how are you doing this morning, and what time is it over there?
It's 5 a.m. as well, and doing great. I don't always get up this early, so this was fun for me.
Well, it looks like it's daylight over there. John, I want to go back to just a few questions and give us the Reader's Digest brief version, because some people didn't make the first event and they were invited to this because they missed it, but they couldn't wait to get on here because we're talking about a very special topic, which I'll introduce in just a moment. But how about a 300-second, a 5-minute overview of how relationships in general have changed since your first Mars-Venus book you wrote?
Well, yes, and it's now 25 years, actually 35 years since I started teaching these ideas, which are, for people who haven't heard them, are kind of revolutionary and can create immediate change in your relationships. Understanding how men and women are different is the fundamental significance of how to create successful relationships and better communication today. We always knew a long time ago that men and women are different, but it was like men lived in one world, women lived in another world, and communication wasn't so important. Men just need to be good providers, and women needed to enjoy being a homemaker to a great extent. That produced love, because women needed men's help and men needed to feel a woman's love and support at home. So there was a lot of benefits. Now suddenly the world has changed. As women are more independent, it changes the whole dynamic of a relationship because they don't need a man in the same way. And it turns out that women's needs primarily change. And that is, instead of needing a man for financial support, which still to some extent she does, but she always has the freedom to do it herself. A new need emerges, and this was discovered by Dr. Maslow, which is when our fundamental needs are fulfilled, when we can fulfill them ourselves, then higher needs come into place. And those higher needs are emotional needs. So it's really important that we understand the motivations of men and women in terms of what makes us feel good the best, what helps us to cope with stress. And that's where men are from Mars, women are from Venus is still very true. The ideas in there is understanding how men and women feel good differently, how we cope with stress. And since I wrote Men Are From Mars, because so many people said, well, are these just your ideas? And some people fit it and some people don't. Well, what I was able to do over the last 25 years, since the book was a #1 success, still is around the world, is to realize the biological differences. So there's no question about, is this just conditioning or is this our biology? Are we born this way? And the reality is it is our biology, and our culture affects us dramatically. And the old culture helped men be more masculine, women be more feminine. And the new culture of the world is actually pushing women over to their male side, but not supporting their female side. And when that happens, men sort of lose the motivations that they used to have. The power that men had is going down because they don't feel needed. It's like a man out of work. And ironically, in America, we see so many men are out of work now. And so what we want to do is recognize the new challenges in relationships and recognize what we can do to improve our relationships. So let's get to the basics of biology. It turns out that it's indisputable that for women, when they have experience of well-being, they have a different mixture of female hormones, particularly estrogen, oxytocin, testosterone, and progesterone. Men particularly have a healthy brew of testosterone. If his testosterone levels are 10 to 30 times higher than a woman, he is stress-free. If his stress levels go up, it's because his testosterone is going down. And when he has stress, that means he's not going to perform his best. That means he can't be in the flow. His heart can't be open. He's not motivated. He's not trustworthy, basically. So what we want to do is help recognize what men can do to bump up their testosterone levels. And it's anything that makes him feel he is a success and making a difference. So he has certain emotional needs. What would be the emotional needs? If you need to feel successful, you need to take action and feel that your mistakes are forgiven. No complaining. You want to feel that what you do is greatly needed and appreciated, and people can depend upon you and trust you. All those situations will raise your testosterone. So if I'm a fireman and I put out the fire and everybody goes, "You saved our lives," my testosterone goes up big time. If I come home and everybody says, "Oh, he's back. Oh, he does nothing. Why did I marry him in the first place? He's lazy." Boom, his testosterone goes down. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. He becomes lazy, so to speak. He needs that fuel, and a relationship can be the most powerful way for a man to get that fuel. Now, the flip side of this is, let's look at women. What women need for well-being is 10 times more estrogen than a man has. We men also have a female side. We have emotions and tenderness and caring and loving. That all has to do with estrogen. But for women, they need 10 times more of this hormone in order to regulate stress, and they need way more progesterone as well. Progesterone is produced when women do what they enjoy doing, just for themselves, selfish time, me time. Women produce estrogen in relationship to others that they're dependent upon. So when a woman feels I can depend on someone for something, her estrogen goes up. For example, if a woman goes to a doctor and says, "Okay, tell me what I need to do to be healthy. I'm feeling sick," her estrogen levels will start to rise. And quite often, just because she's seeking help from somebody that knows more than her or can provide something she can't provide for herself, her estrogen will go up, her stress will go down, her digestion will improve, her brain function will improve, her well-being will increase. So for women, health comes from just having somebody you can depend on. And that's why women go to doctors much, much more than men. If a man feels, "Oh, I can handle this, I can do it myself," that's actually going to raise his testosterone and improve his health. But more importantly is the love. We had all those wonderful slides to begin about the importance of love. It was just inspiring for me to look at that, because it is the truth. To have a meaningful life, we need to have a life filled with love. It's just, what's the point of all this anyway if we don't have love? And women are the generators of love. They do this. When estrogen levels go up, our feelings of love increase. Now, what the challenge for women is when they're making money and when they're achieving goals, they're working hard. Work is a world where we serve others. It's selflessness, it's sacrifice, it's effort, it's achievement, it's accomplishment. All of those circumstances produce testosterone, and testosterone tends to lower estrogen levels. So estrogen tends to lower testosterone levels. So for example, the more you love someone, the higher your estrogen levels go. So when men get married, quite often their testosterone levels will drop. And when they have children, we know statistically their testosterone will drop more. But if they're successful at work, their testosterone goes back up. And that's why success is so important for men, for their well-being. For women, it's important, but it's more important for their survival or for their well-being, financial well-being. But for women, relationship is so important. And relationship with a man, if a woman has a man in her life and she's able to trust him, that she can get her emotional needs met, then suddenly her estrogen levels come back to normal. But if she feels, "Oh, I have to do it all myself," her testosterone levels go high, her estrogen goes down, and her stress levels go up. So the idea of communication, and today we'll be talking about sales as well, is when you can communicate to someone in a way that helps them find emotional well-being, they trust you. And everything in leadership is about trusting. It's about motivating people. It's about understanding what makes people feel that I can depend on you, I can trust you. This is a positive relationship. So relationships are not just for the home, they're everywhere. But it's when we look at the dynamics of intimate relationships, we can truly see how men and women so clearly are different. So some of those common differences look like when a woman shares herself, for example, and talks about her thoughts and feelings, her wishes and wants, What happens then is when somebody listens with empathy, her estrogen levels soar and she feels better. So for me, being a marriage counselor for over 40 years, besides personal growth teacher, et cetera, writing over 25 books, but my main foundation was sitting in a room for 8 hours a day, listening to women complain about their husbands. Women often wanted divorces. Women often did not have any libido. Women often didn't feel good anymore in their marriages. What was the problem? Well, what would happen is they come in unhappy, and I'd get them to talk about their feelings by asking questions, specific tools to ask questions, and they would begin to open up. And many times they would feel disappointment and cry, and they get angry or they feel frustrated. Express their fears and their doubts. But within 20 to doesn't process the emotions. That doesn't help her fulfill her emotional needs. Because when her emotional needs are being fulfilled, literally estrogen levels go up. She starts to smile. She starts to feel happier. And when she feels happier, then a man can be romantic and it will have an effect. If a woman doesn't have plenty of estrogen, romance doesn't do anything. And she'll always feel like not satisfied. And the secret of this, as estrogen levels rise, men have to do less and less to help a woman feel happier. Our job is not to make her happy. Our job is to make her happier. And it's her job in a relationship. Primary job is to be happy. So many women feel to make sure a man loves her and will always be with her and have a lasting relationship where she can depend on him. She feels he has to need her. So she starts doing a lot of things so she feels needed. Actually, it's when a woman needs a man that he is bonded to her. And when women do things for men, we like it. But it's not what makes us bond with her. What makes us bond with her, to want to be there for her, to give ourselves for her, to love her deeply, more than anybody else, is when we feel she needs us. And how do we know she needs us? Is she appreciates us so much. You see, if I go for a couple of days without eating, fasting, boy, when I eat food again, it tastes like $1 million, the best restaurant in the world. So when a woman feels I need a man, then her capacity to love increases. And actually, it's when you feel your needs and anticipate, this is the key thing, and anticipate getting what you need, that's when your estrogen levels rise the most. That's when you're most attractive to a man. And there's so many ways that a woman can, in her own life, build up her estrogen so that a man can take her from that feeling good to feeling great. And we now have the research showing that even a gesture of affection, like touching her hair, giving her a hug, several hugs a day, actually, after 6 seconds, that estrogen level will start to rise. Her testosterone will start to go down. And that creates a softening. Because when women are out there achieving and setting goals and accomplishing them, that's fine. That's her going to her male side. But she becomes hardened. She becomes tough. She becomes unattractive. And she becomes unhappy. That level of fulfillment diminishes when her hormones aren't in balance. And so what a man can do with the right skills is to help her come back to her female side. And that's what women need today. So why do women need men? That's a big question lots of women have. I say, what do I need a man for? And it's basically, you need a man for a new kind of emotional support. And that's a motivator in all areas of our life. You know, why at a time in history where you can choose anybody to work with, you can buy your products from this person or this person or this person or this person. It used to be the primary goal of any purchase was the best deal. And certainly that's still important. But when you've got the best deal everywhere, who are you going to pick? You're going to pick the person that you can trust, the person that you like, the person that you enjoy. And this is literally how people make decisions deep inside. It's when our emotional needs are being met by working with this person. So that's the secret of gender intelligence. Gender intelligence is the ability to understand our differences. And the most significant thing about it is it's easy to learn. It's easy to learn because it all makes sense. When I talk about men, you just need to listen and ask more questions and women will be happier. They go, yeah, I guess if I look back in time, I realize every time we get in arguments, it's because I'm trying to change how she feels. And when I explain to women that trying to change the man's behavior, you'll only get resistance, she has to stand back and go, it's true. When I complain, I get less. And the more I complain, I get less. But really what a complaint is behind it, if you go into clear communication, it's a request. So learning how to ask for help in the right way is the way to motivate men, and instead of trying to push men into changing. Because anytime you push a man's behavior to change, he will resist. And anytime you push a woman's feelings into changing her feelings, you should feel this, you shouldn't be upset, you're overreacting to that situation, don't talk so much, get to the point, why are you exploring so much? And that will resist, it just lasts longer and she can't let it go. It's literally like, if you tell me I can't feel what I feel, then I'll find more reasons to feel this way. And if a man is being rejected from his behaviors, which we often interpret when you try to change our behaviors, if I'm feeling rejected, then I know I've got a good reason for that and I'm going to keep doing it. So literally we push our partners into not growing. But with love, and love is like hands open, it's embracing, it's offering, it's sharing, it's win-win, it's two people getting what they need. When you're in that situation, it's like water being poured onto a plant that's dry. It helps to nurture and grow. So these are some of the basic insights, but there's so many more when it comes to our relationships that we explored in the other presentation, and of course in my books.
Yeah, and I want to speak to that just in a moment. Now, if you've just joined us, we're, of course, with John Gray, author of over 20 books, and millions have been sold. When you have 1 million sales in a book, that's a runaway international bestseller. Well, multiply that by 30 or 40, and that's the man you're looking at. And as he said, 8 hours as a therapist, working with women mostly, but men and women, you have hands-on experience. And he said something that I want to bring to your attention as you're watching. But before I do that, if you are loving this, type in the chat, love it, love it. Just type in the chat, love it, so you can get your fingers moving, because I want you to be experiencing this as a dialogue and not just as a monologue. So let me see it in the chat right now, everyone. Type in love it. There are hundreds of you here, and no matter where you're checking in from the world, then just know that this is your opportunity not only to learn, but to continue your education on forward. Now, before I bring up this word, which is gender intelligence, what is gender intelligence defined? We'll be talking about that, and we'll be bringing Rich Bernstein back, and he is president of Mars Venus Coaching and Training. Well, I was thinking, okay, how do we continue the education for all of you watching right now? How do we do that from people all over the world? What do we do with Success Resources Virtual? Well, John and Rich have a $5,000 training, and it is very involved, and it deals with gender intelligence. And that's a big coaching training that John does a couple times a year. I thought, well, I don't want to start there. Let's start at something that is 1/10 the investment and less, and see how we can have the difference in the way we communicate between men and women. Now, there are many assessments which give you 4 quadrants. Carl Jung really started it. Hippocrates really started it from the very beginning. And then you have all these other assessments between the DISC assessment, Myers-Briggs, and there are many, many out there. The Keirsey assessment. Those are great, but they're complicated. When you just have this binary duality, men and women, Mars and Venus, and you look at gender intelligence between the two, then what I want to offer to you today is in continuing education. It won't be in reading another book, because that goes back on the shelf, as you see many on John's shelves over there. It won't be through a long form training that is going to dedicate a lot of your time and energy. It will be a training that Rich will introduce you to, and later on in the show, where you'll get to persuade the gender in between. No matter what gender you are, we call it sales, you can call it enrollment, but it really is about influence and persuasion. And if you know how they think, then you do unto others as they want to be done unto. So there's emotional intelligence, there's execution intelligence, but John, I want you to define it for the first time ever for our Success Resources people. What does gender intelligence really mean by definition?
Well, gender intelligence, you said so many wonderful things, and I want to just acknowledge that first, and I'll answer gender intelligence, is there are these 4 quadrants, and I've studied the 4 quadrants, and I remember long before I learned about gender differences, which is the foundation of gender intelligence, is that it is complicated, and it's good to know the 4 quadrants, but the reality is behind the 4 quadrants, you've got men and women. It's simple. It's easy. Gender intelligence can be learned very quickly, but we have to be reminded of it again and again. That's why a training helps us to work it out and role play and so forth, understand how to apply gender intelligence. So it sounds a lot easier than it is. You have to apply it. However, gender intelligence is an awareness that men and women have different motivations. They have different priorities, they have different needs, and they're all similar, but at a foundation level. For women, the most important buttons to push to build trust, to build safety, to motivate, to create well-being, to sustain a good relationship. Those buttons, in a sense, those needs that we can fulfill through our communication skills are going to be different in women and different in men. So the idea of sales that people get turned off to is that you're trying to change me. And if a person feels you're trying to change me, then you're trying to change me for your own well-being, for your selfishness, and you really don't care about me. If you want to sell to someone, you want to support them. They need to trust that you're caring about them, and certainly it's a win for you. We all know the salesperson will win, but am I able to provide a service for you? Do I understand how to communicate in a way so that you know I understand what you need, I prioritize what you need, and I'm there for you? And the way people know that, you don't just tell them I'm there for you. It's the way you approach them. It's the small things you do. It's they ask a question, for example. They ask a question. A man, if you're dealing with a man, you want to come up with immediate authority and that, I've experienced that, I understand that, I know that. That's going to build trust in a man. But what's going to build trust in a woman is going to be almost the opposite, which is, tell me more about that. Help me understand the question better. Get her to talk more so she will feel more heard. And then answer the question from the point of view of, well, this is one of the reasons why, and this is one of the reasons why. But don't always come from a place of, I know everything. I've got the answers. I can do it. I'll do it. You don't have to worry about it. I'll handle it. Men love to hear that. I love, as a man wants to feel that he doesn't have to put more effort into something. He can do less and accomplish more to achieve success. And while success is an important thing for men, primarily, it's important to women, but more important to women is the quality of relationship she's going to have in the process of fulfilling her needs, her wishes, and purchasing something or buying a service or working together with you and trusting that you have something to offer her, which will make her feel, yes, I can depend on you. Trust being the primary issue inside of women to build that. What's also important to men is the trust that I can be successful. I will get the results. For women, it's going to be more personal. And that comes back to basic gender intelligence, is that women have a greater identification for their self-esteem with who they are, their character, and their emotional needs. Whereas men have a greater identification with the results. Look what I can do. Look what I've done. Look what you can do for me. More focus on doing. For women, it's more focus on relating. The quality of relationship is most important to build trust in women. The efficiency and the competence in getting the job done is most important to men. And to see now, those are ideas. What we do in our training is go into actual dialogues. If you're dealing with one person versus another, in what situation, how would you apply that? What to look for? Because quite honestly, now we talk about the what men need, what women need. There actually is a continuum of some men are going to be more on their female side. Some women are going to be more on their male side. If a woman is more on her male side, you'd want to address her male side. And there's keys to figure out where she's coming from. But you would address her male side, but then move her to her female side. And that's where her trust would come up. You see, but you have to satisfy where somebody is. And some people by nature, not that they're out of balance, but by nature, a woman could be on her more of her male side. So you handle both the male and female needs as well. How to do that, how to emphasize. Like an example of my gender intelligence is when I stand before an audience and, they say, how do you want to be introduced? Basically, two elements need to be put into that introduction, which is you put in one of those, so I'll throw in the other one right now. But it's one of the introduction is John's written over 20 books. He's sold millions of books. 30 million Men Are From Mars books sold. And so when you say that, and first thing that happens inside of men is I wonder how much money he makes on every book. Because men want to know you've done it. And then the other thing always in introduction is John has been married for 34 years if I'm talking about relationships. So that's the credibility for women. Women want to go, well, if I'm going to learn about relationships from this guy, well, how's his relationship? What has he done? And so forth. So that's sort of the two aspects when I'm being introduced. So the women feel safe and the men feel like, okay, he has something to say. He's been successful. So there I'm addressing the men and I'm addressing the women. And sometimes you have to weave into a presentation or into a sales presentation, both an awareness that one person might be on both sides, one person might be way on one side or the other, and how to do that, recognizing these differences. And that's gender intelligence. It's not using this knowledge to manipulate someone. It's using this knowledge to effectively communicate with someone, to truly hear where they're coming from and provide them the kind of support that they're asking for, whether they're aware of it or not. Because that's what we want to do in sales, is a true win-win situation that motivates them to feel they're going to get what they need and we get what we need at the same time.
Yeah, and speaking of gender intelligence, we'll be talking about that training so you can continue your education. If you're wondering, what's after this? Well, the gender intelligence training on sales, on persuasion, on influence is what's after this. And John has made it available at the lowest cash outlay in anywhere in the world so that you can at least dip your toe in the water and you're not committed to a $5,000 training, which is low when you find out what you actually get from John and however many weeks it takes. Now, if there's a question, is there a replay to this particular video training that we're doing now? The answer is no. Okay, we don't have any replays available because the replay is you enrolling and saying yes when Rich comes on, and we'll be talking about the details of that. And I want you to pay close attention and then make a decision. There's no maybe. It's either yes or no. And I want to be inclusive. So John, as it relates to gender intelligence, now that you've defined it, what happens when you have same gender relationships? How does that either complicate the issue or make it even simpler? Because that question comes up a lot, and I'm sure you get it a lot.
Yes, I mean, same gender has certain issues that are easier than heterosexual ones, and some which are more complicated. So without going into major detail, as I didn't go into the major detail in heterosexual, what happens when you're with someone of the same gender is there is an intuitive awareness of what's most important to that person. You see, in a heterosexual relationship, without gender intelligence, we always think that what our partner wants is what we would want. And so we constantly make mistakes. An example of that making a mistake is that's not having anything to do with gender, so we'll take it out of that for a moment, is my wife, Bonnie. She doesn't like champagne. She doesn't like alcohol. She doesn't like anything with bubbles in it. Okay, so she's not into carbonated drinks. Now, I love alcohol, not too much, of course, but also I love champagne and I love bubbly water. Okay, that's my preference. For years in our marriage, okay, we'd be traveling somewhere, we stop at a convenience store, and I would remember that she doesn't like alcohol, so I would go in and I'd get her apple juice. And there's one kind of apple juice, Martinelli's, which is sparkling apple juice. And I would go in and think, oh, here's something non-alcoholic for her. She'll like this apple juice. And I'd get the bubbly one. And I just couldn't remember that she doesn't like the bubbly. So I'd come into the car and I'd give her the apple juice. And she'd go, John, this has got bubbles in it. I can't believe you. How many times are you going to make this mistake? But for me, it was always thinking, okay, what would I like most? Oh, that looks so good. I want to give that to her. But it would be an annoyance to her. It would make her, she could interpret that you don't love me. You don't care about me. I'm not important to you. How can you forget? Well, typically, one of the things about men is we do forget things like that. Women have a much bigger memory in their brain, and they remember those more relational type things. And that's biologically true. Women's hippocampus, which is where the memories are stored, it's many times twice as big as a man's. And so having said that, then I remember on I think it was our 5th anniversary, and I was we would do a romantic getaway, and they said, oh, would you like champagne in the room? We'll put a bottle of champagne and ice. And I went, no, my wife doesn't drink. And they said, oh, well, we have a replacement for that. We have champagne apple juice, non-alcoholic. And I thought, oh, great. I'd forgotten again. And I still remember when we did a toast to our anniversary at that time. She saw what it was. She took this tiny little sip, barely just put it to her lips, and smiled. And I realized that was her gift to me, which is to recognize and understand that John just forgets some things sometimes. And that was such a sweet moment for me to remember, because it was her accepting and trusting I still love her, even though I forgot that difference. But so that's heterosexual relationship. We tend to give our partners what we think would work best for us, but we don't intuitively understand what works best for them. On their female side, one tends to be more on the male side. The one who's more on the male side is not going to understand intuitively the feminine side needs of your partner. And so this can be very helpful, because in every same-sex relationship, there's always this tendency of one tends to have more of the masculine qualities, one has more of the female qualities, and they can polarize, and as opposed to find a balance. And you find the balance when you consciously create a role reversal from time to time. So if I'm the one who plans the dates and it's 2 guys, then next time you're going to be the one who plans the dates, and the next time I'll be the one. So we consciously choose to switch roles at times to make sure both sides of ourselves are being nurtured and supported. So that's the complication of it. As 2 women said to me, she said, one woman said, I totally relate to when you say women want to be heard. I want my partner to hear me and understand what I go through and so forth. And it's new knowledge for me to realize that my partner really wants to be acknowledged a lot for what they do and appreciated for what they do. More emphasis on that. And then the other partner says to me, she says, yeah, I really get that I need to be acknowledged for what I do. I don't want complaints. I want to be asked for help. I want to get recognition for it. And then I want that first, but then I also want everything she wants as well. So it's basically understanding, once again, that both those needs exist inside of them. Whereas in a heterosexual relationship, most men primarily need what the male side needs and a little bit of what the female side needs, etc.
Okay, well, at the neurochemical level, you've talked about testosterone, you've talked about estrogen, you haven't talked about oxytocin. Yes. So why don't you bring that third in that holy trinity of stuff going through our bodies, because it does impact us. Give us a quick PhD level conversation about oxytocin, because it's usually not as observable, but it's when ignored, it gets us into trouble.
Yes, I began talking about this in the 90s when I wrote Men Are From Mars. It was in 2000 that it was finally scientifically verified that for women, when they're relating chit-chat talk, where they're just simply not trying to solve problems, but just sharing feelings, sharing thoughts, relating to each other, a hormone called oxytocin gets produced. And in that situation where they're not goal-oriented, but relationship-oriented, oxytocin increases, and oxytocin lowers stress levels in women. And that was significant. So what are the things that stimulate oxytocin? Well, what I saw back in the early 90s is that when a woman gives birth, the body makes a lot of oxytocin. That's what it was known for scientifically, which was to cause the contractions and drop the milk for breastfeeding. Two very feminine activities that are not necessary for men. And there was kind of an assumption that still some people talk about that oxytocin lowers stress for men. It doesn't. It can actually raise stress for men in certain situations. But for women, it always lowers their stress level. Now, stress is, we're saying stress, but when I'm talking about the hormone cortisol. Cortisol causes blood flow to stop from the front part of the brain and goes into fight or flight, fake and fold. So these are like poor relationship behaviors that we automatically go into when we're producing cortisol. And what oxytocin does is lower cortisol. And that was the beginning of a huge revolution where we're looking at all these things about cortisol and then oxytocin lowering cortisol for women. And what the research shows is that when women are holding a baby, for example, and that's how I saw it, is I see women start to glow, almost like, when they're feeling romanced, their face would glow. I would sit in malls watching women, and women would have their little strollers and the baby in the stroller back in the 90s. And I watch women come like bees to the flower, they get the honey. Literally, women would glow. Now, they don't glow so much now because women are different, okay? When you're way on your male side, oxytocin doesn't make you glow. But actually, the function of oxytocin is, one of its functions, is it literally lowers your testosterone and increases estrogen. And that's why it lowers stress for women, why it doesn't lower stress for men, because when men's estrogen goes high and his testosterone goes low, that's what happens to men when they're experiencing stress. Okay, so any man who's experiencing cortisol, his testosterone's going down and his estrogen's going up. And that's the imbalance that men go into when they go into fight or flight, which is a big aha for men, because every man, if he wants to feel confident and motivated and strong and positive attitude and mood, the biological foundation of that is higher testosterone, less estrogen. And when a man is angry, for example, biologically his testosterone's going down and his estrogen's going up. And if he, like a woman, talks when they're angry, estrogen will go higher. And for women, that might be exactly what she needs to lower her stress levels. But for a man, it will only raise his stress levels even more. So this becomes one of the applications of gender intelligence, is when couples have some tension, don't get the man to talk more. Don't ask him a lot of questions if he's experiencing some tension. But if a woman's experiencing some tension, then you want to ask questions and get her to talk. So if you apply this, these ideas get applied everywhere. If you apply this to persuasion, influence, sales, and so forth, in that situation, or to leadership as well, if a woman is stressed, you want to create more space for her to articulate her experience, her feelings, her goals, her achievements, for her to feel heard in an appropriate way in that setting. Whereas for a man, you don't want to ask so many questions, but you want to give more solutions. You want to say, okay, this is the situation, this is our experiences, this is what we can do. You're probably experiencing this, I'm experiencing that. So you're basically drawing out an objective picture of what's going on, and you're talking more, not asking him so many questions if he is upset. Because when a man is upset, stressed, if he's emotional, his testosterone's going down, and talking actually will lower his testosterone if he's talking about what's upsetting him. If you ask him a question about, so what should we do about this? Or what do you think is the problem? Once again, when he analyzes and thinks or solves the problem, and you say, good idea, or that makes sense, or tell me more, that's going to get him more on his analytical side, not his emotional side, and that will also bring his testosterone back up. So these are distinctions that if you have a greater awareness of them, you know how to manage situations in a way that would support them in finding well-being, and maybe not necessarily what you would need in order to find well-being.
Well, with this era of social distancing, which is not going to last forever, it's not permanent, and wearing masks, depending on what part of the world you live in, whether you're still in lockdown or not in lockdown, depending on how this COVID-19 has impacted your part of the world, now more than ever, it's important to learn about gender intelligence, because when this is all over and we start coming together again and hugging each other, and everything is going to change. Now is like we're in a cocoon, and learning it now when we finally get out of it is so important. So why is gender intelligence important to learn and to master when it comes to influencing the opposite sex or even the same sex? And why is it now, at this moment, even more important, if you have an opinion about that?
Well, the foundation of a relationship, and I do have a big opinion about that, a lot of experience of dealing what causes conflict and problems for us personally, and that then reflects externally. Let me say very clearly that with good gender intelligence, if you have relationships, intimate relationships or even friendships, if in those friendships you're able to stimulate stress-reducing hormones, now you come back into the workplace from a place of, I would say, radiance. When you come from a place of radiance, flow, people trust you more. That's just the reality. If you're feeling angry with a spouse, or you're feeling lonely because you don't have people in your life, that's going to affect other people's ability to trust you. Energetically, that exists. So we have to realize that our personal life, if it's fulfilling, becomes a foundation for people to trust us in sales and in leadership and so forth. That's the foundation. And that's also where we work out our understanding of how people relate to each other, because in our intimate relationships, it's people are more willing to reveal what's inside. Once we go to the workplace, we have a cloak on. We don't reveal what's inside. We've got our cards up. We're playing poker, so to speak. So it's in our intimate relationships that we really get to know how somebody who's different from us, how they experience the world differently, and reminds us of how to be patient, how to be respectful, how to be empathetic, how to hear another point of view without trying to change it. These are really important skills that we gain through our intimate relationships, and we also grow within ourselves, and we can bring that into our work life, into achievement in our work life. Now, in during this COVID time, and we were talking about oxytocin, what we found is that non-sexual touch is also a major stimulator of oxytocin. So women can greatly benefit from getting hugs. Now, getting hugs is different from hugging yourself. You see, we all know that to be the case. You can massage yourself, and that could help with blood circulation. But somebody massaging you, somebody touching you in a non-sexual way has a completely different effect. You see, that's the simple evidence of how powerful a relationship is, how we relate to others, and to be more intimate, friendship, caring, interdependence, and so forth. And then bring that into the workplace. We radiate a sense of, I'm trustworthy, I'm capable of being trusted. So there's an energetic that comes from your sense of well-being, from your personal life. And oxytocin, in my marriage with Bonnie, at least 4 hugs a day. When I first see her in the morning, when I say goodbye in the morning, when I come back, and when I before bed, at least those 4 times, I just make a goal. And other times complimenting someone about their personal behavior, so to speak, or something about them. Oh, your hair looks wonderful. What a beautiful outfit you're wearing today. That dress looks great with those shoes. Oh, you got your hair cut. These noticing people when you come into a room, if it's a woman, walking over to her, acknowledging her, not just coming in and ignoring her. When you're leaving a room, just saying, hey, I'm off to read a book, going to the restroom, whatever, just sort of acknowledging where and when you're going to be someplace. These are all important things. In sales, same thing. If you're in sales and you say to a woman, I'll call you on Tuesday at 3:00, call her on Tuesday at 3:00. And if it's a man and you don't, the man figures out he's probably had some emergency come up. But for a woman, she feels like, I knew it. He doesn't care that much about me. Women are always looking for little signals. And it's the little expressions of love that generate oxytocin. And a big expression of love will generate oxytocin. But the big aha is that I can bring her 50 roses. It's going to create 1 surge of oxytocin, or I can bring 1 rose and it will produce the same surge of oxytocin. So if you want for a woman to build up lots of oxytocin, then you want to do lots of little things. And that shows up in sales as well. Little acknowledgments make a big difference. Little things that you do for someone, offering to help without them having to ask. These are all things that say, I'm seen, I'm heard, I'm understood, and I'm respected. Big oxytocin producers, and why it has such a big influence, oxytocin, is that oxytocin then helps her to calm, helps her to put down her shield, helps her to put down her defenses. That's her testosterone. I'm ready to go to battle. So she softens because the estrogen levels start to rise. And as her estrogen levels start to rise, then every little thing you do for her causes it to go higher and higher and higher. So that's called scoring points. You always want to be aware that little things score points with women. Big things score points with men, okay? Little things score hardly nothing. So don't waste your time on the little things with a man. Focus on the big things. And particularly in our intimate relationships, one of the things women don't realize is that the more you have an accepting, non-critical attitude to a man when he makes a mistake, he gives you big points. So if I'm late for 2 hours and she doesn't get really upset with me, I give her 100 points, basically. And even if she does get upset, I can certainly understand it. And here's one really powerful communication skill, which is if she wants to share her feelings and have a man really hear her, is to put him out of the stress mode. Don't say, we need to talk, I'm upset with you. Immediately, he's going to go into fight or flight. He can't hear anything you say because his blood goes from the front part of the brain to defensive reactions. This is how we are designed when we're under stress. So you want to lower his stress level first so he can hear what you're saying and benefit from the communication as well as you'll feel heard. So you start out and you just simply say, now, honey, this is not a big deal. You don't have to say anything. I just want you to understand how I feel. Mission accomplished, ladies. Then he'll sit there and go, oh, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to say anything. And the irony is if he feels that way, then be quick about it and then leave the room and let him reflect on what he heard rather than speak and defend himself, because that's just going to keep him from absorbing what was shared. These are powerful, powerful tools in our intimate relationship. And actually, by learning to be a good listener, men, which is the other half of the equation, what you learn when you become a good listener is that people are different and that everybody wants to be seen and heard. It's just for men, they want to be seen and heard in a different way. Women want to be seen and heard in a different way. And learning gender intelligence helps us to emphasize those distinctions.
Okay, now, John, we're going to bring Rich, your president of your coaching division, on board, and you have taught many people about gender intelligence and the differences and similarities in the way we relate to each other, whether it's same gender or different gender. Before we bring Rich on, so Rich, stand by. In about 5 minutes, I want to bring you on to talk about the gender intelligence as it relates to sales. Now, I want all of you to realize, as you're watching right now, sales is the general term we're using. You can call it influence, whether it's selling an idea, whether it's selling as a civic representative in politics, which is very important these days, whether it's selling your kids to go to bed on time or eat certain foods, whether it's selling your spouse that you care about them, but maybe you're presenting it in the way you want it presented instead of doing unto them as they want it presented. So gender intelligence, what John said, it is learning about the other person, but it's also knowing what's making you tick. Because understanding yourself, then that messaging becomes a little bit more forgiving and you can be unapologetic for your feelings. As these feelings flare up, it may not have anything to do with you, and it may have to do with the differences in gender intelligence and what's natural for us. So John, here's my question to you before we bring Rich. You've written books, you've got millions out there. As far as people learning to change permanently, I mean, if we want a positive and permanent change, a book can get us there if we have the personal initiative to apply. between the learning doing gap. How has coaching changed lives for people who have come to you for, let's say, the high level coaching that you have for $5,000, which we're not offering today, but how has that changed lives in a more permanent way after people haven't learned this most of their lives until they come to you? Do they come to you at a level 5 and they leave at a level 10? Because if people don't know where they are gender intelligence wise, their quotient, let's call it the GIQ, their gender intelligence quotient, maybe they're at a level 5. When they're done with what we're about to offer, can they end up at a level 10? So go back to the coaching that Ron has led over the years and give us some examples of how permanent change can happen with the learning part.
Think about coaching as, I'll put it in my own personal experience, which is, if I want to learn to play tennis, I can read from a book and go out there and on a backboard and practice. And when I would play tennis with my coach, I could play tennis with a friend as well, and we'd be patting the ball back and forth, running all around. But I played tennis with a coach, a pro, a professional. My game dramatically improves, and that's what the whole coaching program's about. Is first of all, you get coached on being a coach, and in our coaching program, you're coached every week. You can't really coach other people effectively unless somebody's coaching you, because you get to see the value of it. Because to give value to people, you have to realize that what you're saying has given value to you, and then you really feel the value. Some of the best coaches had problems in their life, and they saw how this information transform their life. They're the true believers. They get out there and they go, look what it did for me. Look what it did for me. So it's got to work for you. And so when it works for you, then it works for other people. In sales, for example, is in that situation, you have to believe in your product. I see so many people just selling just to make money, as opposed to, this is a value, and the more it's a value to you, you see it, then you can sell that. I mean, that's your enthusiasm. And helping people, wanting to help people, that's what builds the sincerity. Sincerity in sales is everything today. And it didn't used to be, but it is today, is that this truly works. So it's real. And when you become a coach, what the best thing, we have hundreds of coaches, and many of them are doing it as a business, okay? But others are not doing it as a business. They're just doing it because they want to integrate these ideas. They teach the classes that we teach. We have 5 different classes we teach you to teach. And by teaching those classes and then doing some coaching, or just coaching your friends, applying this information in your personal life, it's by helping other people, you learn something better. I have to say, my wife would say I'm a really good husband, but I think the reason I'm a really good husband is because I'm constantly telling other people, other men, how to be good husbands. And I'm constantly listening to women and understanding them and validating their feelings. That helps me to understand my wife better. And a funny story here is that part of how Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus was birthed was listening to women in counseling. Also, I listened to men, but more women come to counseling. And they would talk about their husbands and have complaints. And I go, that's just what my wife said. That's just what my wife said. And that's what every one of them said. One of them, for example, to give you an example of that, is one day, it was like 3 or 4 women that day had the same complaint. And they said, no matter, they would say that their husband would hug them in kind of a sexual way. And the woman would say, the only time you touch me is when you want sex. And they'd be upset about that. And I'm like, why are they upset about that? And then that very day, I went up in the kitchen and I just gave my wife a gentle hug. And she says, John, the only time you touch me is when you want sex. This is before I started doing the non-sexual hugs 4 times a day. To build the oxytocin up, because it's only when oxytocin builds up that her estrogen levels will go from 10 times more than a man to 20 times more than a man. That's when touch can be sexual and a woman enjoys the touch in the personal relationship. The oxytocin goes up, then the estrogen goes up. Now she's capable of enjoying the romantic aspect of a relationship. And that's hard for men to understand, because we don't need oxytocin to enjoy the romantic aspect of our relationships. As a matter of fact, too much oxytocin will dull the romantic aspect of the relationship. And then we become like brother and sister, friends, housemates, and so forth. We need higher testosterone levels. Oxytocin lowers testosterone, which is part of the dance, of intimacy. I talk about how men need to go close, their estrogen levels go up, their oxytocin goes up, their testosterone goes down. Then they need time to separate. That's called cave time, distant time. They pull away, and when they pull away, they rebuild their testosterone easily by doing things that make them feel good. Then testosterone goes up. They want to come and share that with a woman, and then his estrogen comes back up. So it's a dance for men coming and going, coming and going. And when women don't take that personally, because they understand it's not about her, it's about his need, relationships can thrive at that time. You'd asked me about COVID. I wasn't able to fully answer that. And I want to answer that because relationships are being really challenged right now, Alex. There's a lot of violence in some relationships. There's arguments in some relationships. People say things they don't mean. And unfortunately, it's because they're in a fight or flight state. We don't say what we mean. We say what our conditioning said. We say what our parents would say or their grandparents.
Let me do a timeout on that. I want you to bring this up because in the news, mainstream news anyway, they talk about, people are at home and there's children are not being treated properly. The relationships aren't working. And I want to get your take as you continue with your answer. I think it has to do more with fight or flight fear than it has to be with being together. Being together more often, I think, has less to do with it than the level of fear that's being consumed because of what may happen in the future and what the situation is. So I want to get your insight on that before we bring Rick.
Well, it's a combination. Being together doesn't fulfill, there's two basic needs in a relationship. One is togetherness and separateness. You've got to have separateness. And when you're in the house all together, you don't have that separateness. You take it personally. I remember as an author, I used to write books in the house and my wife would feel ignored the whole time because he's just in the next room and she'd want to wander in and talk to me. And I'm like, focused on my writing. I can't just shift gears like that. You have all the other vitamins, but no sunshine, you'll be unhappy. But suddenly you go out and you get sunshine, you'll feel fantastic because you also have all the vitamins. But if you have no vitamins and you just get sunshine, it's not going to have the same effect. So your partner loses their potency to make you happier because you're not happy. And so you're stuck together. And so women, and what we were talking about before was really good, is what we learn. What this message does, gender intelligence, helps us to learn how to give ourselves what we need to be happy, then look to our partners to be happier. And that's a very important skill because you can't get everything you need from one person as much as we'd like to. And there's this romantic feeling that we get when we have all the vitamins except one, which is the romance vitamin, vitamin D. And so that somebody comes into your life and they're like sunshine, and you feel, oh, they're so good. And your mind thinks they have the power to make me so happy. They don't have that power. You have that power to be happy. They can take you to happier. And that's what we have to recognize. We're not getting the normal kinds of support that we would have in order to be happy. Part of being happy and fulfilled is being responsible for our happiness and not being overly dependent on someone else. So if I'm traveling, for example, I have to get there on time. Well, that's a little stress. I have to remind myself, you're going to get there fine. There's a traffic jam, but how much longer is it going to take? You get there, you have to stand in line. You feel, oh, it's a long line. And then you got to go, oh, well, I'll get there on time. It's plenty of time. No big deal. I'll still get my seat. It's reserved. You see, we're constantly facing stress, and we're coping with stress on our own. We're taking responsibility. We're not blaming everybody else. We're coming back to ourselves, coming back to ourselves, coming back to ourselves. That's called 80% of our happiness comes from us and the choices we make, not dependent on our partner. But we're not going through that now. We sit passively in front of a TV set, and when you feel passive in front of danger, your cortisol levels go up. When cortisol goes up, blood flow stops from the part of the brain that can feel empathy, the leadership part of the brain, the part of us that can choose our responses appropriate to the situation. And instead, we go into a reactive mode that we have no control over. These feelings just come up. It reacts, and the reactions we get when we're under stress are the reactions we observed in our early years that our parents had when they were under stress. Whether we saw it or not, those DNA reactions are inside of us. So often we get in these horrible escalating arguments where we're not talking clearly. We're saying things that are reactivity. And we say things that we regret, and our partners will think, oh, that's your true colors, because we end up saying things like, well, then we should just get a divorce. Well, I can never make you happy. Well, you don't love me at all. Well, you just ignore me, and I'm not important to you, and you don't love me. Well, I don't love you. And people get into these arguments. It's not who they are. It's not their true colors. It's what they become when they're not who they are. And the irony of this, if anybody knows me, they would know John is probably the most generous person you've ever met. But if I'm in fight or flight, I can become very stingy. I withdraw completely if I'm in fight or flight. It's literally we become the opposite of who we are when we're in fight or flight. So let's not measure our partners by that. Let's measure our partners by who they become when their heart is open, and know that we have the ability with new communication skills of gender intelligent, how to provide the kind of support our partners need to be their best self when they're in our presence. But more importantly, how we can provide the support for ourselves to be our best self. So then we come to the relationship to overflow. And when we overflow, we want to know how to provide the best kind of support for our partners. And that's what a relationship does for our work life as well. Work should be an overflowing. We get our personal needs met in our personal life. Then we overflow. We can be selfless in the workplace because that's what it's about. And that's what builds trust when we're here to serve others.
All right, well, let's work on that. I'm very excited. We're going to put your president of your coaching division in the big screen right now. And Rich, come on in the room and we'll make sure that we get your slideshow set up. The rest of you, if you'd like to learn what gender intelligence is so that you can persuade others faster, better, and easier, say yes in the chat. Because there's no reason to continue if you think you're at the top of your game with gender intelligence, which is a term which is new to me, but understanding myself and others, just the way John has framed it. Now we're going to take you through a journey of how to sell others. Some of you, that's a dirty word, sell. It's not. It's how to persuade, motivate, enroll, because you are constantly selling, although you may not call it that. And nothing feels worse than feeling rejected because something wasn't received the way you wanted to send it. So we have the president and CEO of John Gray's coaching division, Rich Bernstein. Rich is in the Las Vegas area. And Rich, I'm going to turn it over to you as the maestro because we're going to go through the gender intelligence selling, which I want to also just highlight. It's about influence and persuasion and not just selling products and services. Go for it.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. One thing I just want to mention before I start talking about the training itself is once you hear this gender intelligence, it's very difficult to unring that bell. Do you know what I mean? Now everything becomes not just with spouses, not just with sales, with marketing, with everything that you're doing in your life. It's kind of amazing that once you learn this, you can't turn it off. In your personal relationships, in marketing, in leadership, John, you know that. You taught me this. And I think everybody on this call now knows why I joined Mars Venus and was attracted to you, John. When you talk about this stuff, it's fascinating. I get excited. It's very hard to turn it off in my own life, in my own home, and in my own business.
Let me speak to
And
that.
as a parent,
Once you learn,
I have a boy and a girl.
once you learn it, it's impossible to go back. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay, good.
It's
All right.
impossible to turn it off.
Awesome.
And you know what?
And one thing I wanted to share, because of what John brought up, if you can see my screen for a second, John, you brought this up earlier, is when you're introducing yourself, and you did talk about a man and a woman, if they're together, this is part of the training that we teach. And before I did the presentation, I just wanted to show you this, that we actually look at every single, what we call gender sensitive touch points. So whether or not you're talking to a gatekeeper, and that person is, I'll decide whether or not you're going to talk to the person you're selling to, or even leaving a voicemail, or reaching them for the first time, or needs analysis, or a proposal, how they read a proposal. A man and a woman read proposals differently. And you want to be able to put that into the proposal that talks to each one of them, just like when you introduce yourself, John. That was a really good point. Handling objections, the follow-up, the closing. What do you do after you close? So I just wanted to share this really quick with everybody to see how sensitive each one of these points for gender is. I hope everybody can see my screen.
I think we can all see it, Rich.
Good. So, John, if you want to just talk a little bit about each one of those points, and I'm going to bring out the presentation.
Oh, Rich, I'd rather you talk about it because you're the main, part of everybody should know, part of why Rich is on this call is that Rich has got a lifetime of successful sales. He's been training salespeople. How many years, Rich, have you been training before Mars Venus?
30. But I don't want to admit that, 30. A long time.
He's like the number one salesperson ever. And also in terms of training salespeople. And Rich and I are a great partnership because he's had that in the world training. I'm a salesperson of my ideas, but he's been training coaches to be successful in every area of life, and influencing others and leadership skills and so forth. And he came to me, he said, John, this is blowing my mind because when you add gender intelligence to what I've experienced and how to motivate people to sell, how to overcome their challenges in selling, what are your own obstacles inside to overcoming that so you can be open with someone. And then when you're open with someone, how do you then provide the unique kind of support that person needs in each situation? Because anytime you're selling to a person, and I want to emphasize it's not just about selling, as Alex did, because as parents, we're constantly selling to our children. We want to be role models for them and show them and address their needs differently to manage them and motivate them. Because in the past, when it comes to parenting, the major motivator was fear. Okay, it's like if you're not going to do it right, you're going to be punished, and that's an old model. And it's in sales, it's an old model, which is that you can't find it anywhere else, so you better get it from us. But now people have so much choice. And when you have children, if you're not going to focus mainly on punishment and threat and danger if they don't listen to you, what motivates them? What motivates them is good communication skills. And that's really, really important. So as you learn in this training, you also have the same communication skills that will help you manage your children effectively, help you manage stress within yourself effectively. And then when you're stress-free, you can remember how to use these skills in sales, because that's what we have to recognize is that if we're not centered in ourselves, already we're going to lose sales because we're trying to change people. When you are fulfilled within yourself, when you're not desperate, when you're not needy, when you're coming from a centered place, then people can trust that you're there for them rather than you're there to change them so you get what you need. It's more about first change yourself to feel good, center yourself, and then provide the kind of support they need. And there's so many good programs where people can learn how to center themselves. But once you've done that, you've got to learn how do you provide the right support for them. And Rich will do that and bring you through each of those situations. Go ahead, Rich, do that.
That's what's amazing. And I got to be honest, John, I don't know if you remember 13 years ago, I came to Mars Venus with a marketing and sales background. And my first question to you was, what does Mars Venus have anything to do with sales and marketing and business? And I don't know if you remember your answer, but it floored me. You said, if you don't think business is all about relationships, I'm talking to the wrong guy. That really surprised me, because you said everything in business is about relationships. Don't you have relationships with your customers and your clients? Don't you have relationships with your employees and vendors and suppliers? I never looked at business that way. And that's what I meant by you can't unring that bell once you think about it. And that's the first thing we did, was bridge all of your books into the business world. It's not just sales, it's marketing. Men and women respond to marketing differently. Men and women respond to customer service very differently. Men and women respond to everything that goes on, leadership. A man and a woman, how you lead and how they lead is very, very different. So I wanted to talk about this one because it applies to our whole life. Like Alex said, not just selling a person, but influencing your children, your spouse, your friend, everything that you do, you want to connect very differently to a man than you do to a woman. And the tools that you've taught us, John, apply perfectly to our personal life and to our business life. So this just tells a little bit about Mars Venus. John, I think everybody on the call knows the brand, knows you, knows how powerful this is, and why I joined was because I'm fascinated every time you open your mouth. It's such interesting information. One thing I did learn, and that's why I put all the books here, is a lot of people don't know all the books, John. They know your original book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. But when you look at things like Collide, about stress and the workplace, and all the different books that you've written, that's one thing I got to hand it to you, is you have literally looked at what is going on in the world today and how do I apply gender intelligence to that. That's the beauty of Mars Venus. It keeps growing. Like your brand new book, Beyond Mars and Venus. That applies to what's going on right now in the world. And I think it's critical to keep applying the gender to everything we do in our life.
Now, Rich, I'm going to.
This is a little bit about our team.
If I can interject.
Go ahead, John.
For you,
Oh,
Rich,
Alex.
Rich, you and John, if you turn off your camera but keep on your mic, that will be more PowerPoint intelligence so that people can see the PowerPoint without the picture. So just look, there you go. And then let's see the slides now. Go for it, Rich. Okay, here we go. Full screen.
Okay. And this is just an introduction. We have a really nice team, not just here in Las Vegas with a digital marketing team and myself and some corporate trainers, but we also have them all over the world, from Egypt to Saudi to Guatemala to Mexico to Australia, Europe. We're very proud of the team that we've built around the world, and they love John's work and applying it every day. What makes our company unique? I'll tell you right now, 98% of the people on the planet Earth today actually recognize that brand. That's pretty amazing. I talk to people all over the world every single day, and they'll say, oh, Mars Venus, I know that. So it's very interesting how this applies to business, to personal life, to everything. And anywhere you are in the world, they will know that brand. You asked, what is gender intelligence? John, you had a very interesting answer earlier. I have a little bit of a different answer in that I look at not just the physical side, but the attitudes and the behaviors of men and women are very different. You also mentioned something that I think is very important, is there's a continuum where there's a lot of men that are on their feminine side, and there's a lot of women that are on their masculine side. And how do we talk to them? How do we connect? We have to find that continuum as we build a relationship with them. And gender intelligence, like I said, has a lot to do with how men and women communicate differently and why. There's different parts of the brain that we will teach you in the training of why men and women communicate differently. Process information, how we receive it and process it. John, you talk a lot about the corpus callosum, that connective tissue between the two hemispheres of the brain. Well, men think very linearly and women think very fractally. They see the bigger picture just because of that one difference in the brain. They lead differently. They manage time differently. That's a big one. My wife and I definitely manage time very differently. We cope with stress differently. In fact, you mentioned it earlier, we don't just cope with stress differently, we cope with stress oppositely. And that in itself stresses us out. The fact that my wife doesn't manage her stress the way I do, where I want to be alone and she wants to talk, that in fact increases my stress. And then important, what we talk about here is buy differently. And we're not talking about just buy goods and services. We're talking about every interaction you have with people should be very different with a man than it is with a woman. So what does gender intelligence do? It actually teaches you how, and John, you use the word appreciate a lot. I love that word. It teaches us how to not just know the differences, but appreciate them and actually implement them into our talking, our interaction, our raising of children, our relationships. Everything that we do is going to be based on knowing gender intelligence. And now you can't not know it. There's 3 parts of our training. The first part is really understanding the brain differences, the hormonal differences, the chemical differences. All of that is so different that once you understand that, it'll change the way you talk to a man and a woman. Then we want you to understand why men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And the third part is incorporating gender intelligence into sales. Like I said, and this is very interesting, when I first started approaching corporations and companies about this specific training, I used to ask 2 questions. 1, do you believe men and women buy differently? I get a resounding, of course. Do you train your salesmen to sell differently? Dead silence. That was our whole presentation to any corporation that wanted to learn this. They said, you got to come in, you got to show us what you're talking about. Because once you ring that bell, you can't unring it. So this is what it does. It helps people to operate and work better with the opposite sex, and not just in a sales environment. Like I said, I come from a marketing background as well. When I started doing marketing pieces just for Mars Venus, I started thinking, wait a minute, how would a woman look at this piece differently than a man? And then you can accomplish both. As you said, John, when you make an introduction, you want to address him and her at the same time. That has a lot to do with the brain chemicals, the brain structure, the hormonal differences. It's very powerful. And I will tell you another thing. Diversity is a huge issue right now in corporations around the world. People are moving from Middle East to Australia, from Europe to Canada. There's so much movement that a big push in companies is diversity. And when I talk to them about cultural diversity and this kind of diversity and language diversity and age diversity, the minute I talk about gender diversity, they go, wait, what did you say? That's a big one that seems to be overlooked. And in sales managers teach sales techniques, do the same with a man and same with a woman. When you learn this, not only will you do it differently, but your sales world will change. What are the benefits? Well, obviously, if you're in sales, you'll make more money. But what we look at Mars Venus is quality of life. That's the real thing that'll get better. My relationship with my wife is better. My relationship with my daughter and my son, because he's a boy and she's a girl, and I'm going to use these techniques to be a better dad. So it's really important that you understand all the aspects of how it's going to change your life, because Mars Venus, whether you take a course like this or you become a coach, it's all about helping people have a better quality of life. This content has given me a better quality of life. It also promotes emotional intelligence. That was a buzzword 10, 15 years ago. Gender intelligence ties into emotional intelligence, and a lot of people don't realize that we're really looking at the emotions of a man and a woman, and how do you touch those gender sensitively in order to have a better relationship. You have a better relationship, you make more sales. You make more sales, you make more money. You make more money, as John said, your testosterone goes up, your cortisol, your stress goes down, and your life gets better. That's what we're all about here, improving quality of life. So this is really important if you're in a global company, global competitiveness. This to us is a competitive edge. If you're a salesman or you run a whole sales team, this is a competitive edge that you know gender intelligence, because once you know it, you'll teach it to your teams. You'll not only use it every day, personally and professionally, but you'll actually teach it to others. This is something, most of our workshops, believe it or not, we went into the banking industry. We went into oil and gas industry. We went into the public sector. There's a lot of different places, because what I learned when I met John is it applies everywhere. One of the good things about gender intelligence, it applies everywhere. One of the bad things, it applies everywhere. So you can use it in every single aspect of your life. There's nowhere in the world where men and women, that interaction is not taking place. Nowhere. Think about your typical day. So about our course, what is it all about? We're going to train you all the gender intelligence, like I said. We're going to train you how to do it. We would role play. You would actually learn. There's a manual 200 pages thick that you take home with you. You'll download it and follow it through the course on, like I showed you, the gender sensitive touch points. Each one of those points you're going to learn how to do hands-on. This is not a lecture. It's an interaction. There are 4 modules. The first one, as I said, gender-based intelligence. You have to learn what it is first, how it works, all the different parts of the brain. When you say this, what does it activate in a woman? How is she going to receive that? Module 2 is all about why men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Gender 3, like I said, we go through all of those gender-sensitive touch points. And then we're adding a bonus to this because you're here today. The bonus is, and there's an amazing book John wrote called Why Mars and Venus Collide. This was true in my marriage. I've been married 29 years, and we collided over the same issue. We did not cope with our stress the same way. So we're throwing that in today as a bonus. It's a 2-hour workshop at the end. So you'll do 2 hours on module 1, 2 hours on module 2, 3, and then we're adding this 2 extra hours of how men and women cope with stress differently and how that affects your relationships. That's a powerful one. And that's one that our coaches around the world actually teach all the time. It's especially designed for sales-oriented people, but it doesn't have to be. As John talked about and Alex mentioned, it applies everywhere in your life. And there's a lot of advanced, complex things that you would learn that you can take into your professional life. If you have a boss that's a man or a woman, how do you treat them? If you have employees that are men and women, how do you treat them? So it applies across the board in all aspects of business. It will drive up sales. It'll attract more customers because you are actually going to do marketing a little bit differently as well. And it stimulates consumer interest. This is important. These are some of the little things. And it's funny, John, you mentioned this earlier. On the top right, these are one of the things we teach, is if you tell a woman you're going to call her tomorrow and you don't make that call, she will always remember that. If you tell a man you'll call him tomorrow, and you don't call, he'll think, oh, he's busy. It's okay. I understand. Women hold promises, our feet to the fire. So these are things that you would learn in that training and how to close more business. Very, very important. These are the aspects.
Let me throw in something there, Rich, is that actually what I learned as well is it's not just promises, it's little promises. They give more weight to promises, like at 3:30, I'll give you a call. And she's looking, is he going to do that? They look for, are you going to do the little things? And that's really, really significant. Whereas you wouldn't realize that when you wouldn't need to do that so much with a man. But with a woman, it's those things that build trust. Because for women, it's always about she can trust you. And for men, when you deal with men, it's he can trust your competence, that you're capable of doing the big things. You know, one of my experiences, I lost a few $1 million on a deal one time because I wasn't at a meeting. And we were starting a company in competition in the beginning of the in the beginning, when Yahoo was starting out and all of the search engines, I had a company where we had a search engine, and the woman her team had come up with a system, and we had a board of directors. They were all men. She was the CEO, and we needed to bring in another CEO to bring it public, because you need to have that recognition. And this is a man who brought 2 other companies public for hundreds of millions of dollars. And they went to the meeting, and I wasn't there. And all he kept doing is talking to the men and not to her. And she refused him to be the CEO. And that's what brought it all down, which was he kept saying, look, I've done this before. I can do this. I'll make it happen. And she would bring up her considerations, and he wouldn't listen to them. All he had to do was practice some sales techniques to sell himself to her, which would be
Gender intelligence.
Gender intelligence. Help me understand that better. Tell me more. Well, give me an example of when that happened. I see what you're saying. What do you think would be the best thing to do with that? And then she would say, well, what do you think? And then he could give his ideas. But as opposed, he was just, all the men were impressed by his credentials, that he knew how to take a company public. He could run this thing. We could all make all this money. And she was more interested in the relationship. And she just felt, I can't have a relationship with this guy. And because of that, we weren't able to successfully go public. It was really a disaster, because we just missed, I wasn't there to provide the gender intelligence to that meeting.
And that's so critical. It's even, if you look at the promises, like you said, women want little promises to be kept. You can actually make little promises and then keep them in order to connect with a woman. With a man, it's all about credibility, like you said. They really need to see your medals. What have you done? What achievements? You can't do that with a woman. So there's a lot of do's and don'ts you're going to learn as well. Not just what to do, but what not to do with a woman and a man. Because a man, really, you want to get to the point quickly.
Let me interrupt one more time. Sorry, Rich. And it's interesting because we see some gender intelligence happening right now in the chat. Some people are saying, how do I get registered? Where's the link? Other people are saying, tell me more, tell me more. So without further ado, there's a button that we can bring up. Rich, as you keep going, some people got what they need, and they're gonna get registered, and there will be a button that Success Resources will put up to get registered now, and then we will keep talking, and we'll do some Q&A as we move forward. But sorry to interrupt.
And that's the slide I'm on, Alex, how to register. And we're bringing this particular course, like you mentioned, a 5,000. That's to become a Mars Venus coach. We typically sell this in corporate at $995. We're doing it at 50% today, $495.
Excellent. Excellent. And
here's another thing. We are so confident, Alex, that it comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. We know this will change your life.
Okay, excellent. And those of you watching, where you see in your chat, you'll see it says offers, confirm purchase. You'll see the price point. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can actually go through it, increase your gender intelligence, and if you're dissatisfied, then that is your option. That's not why to say yes now, but that is an option that provides you 100% airtight, risk-free, where you don't even have to trust Rich, John, or me, because you have that airtight guarantee, which has taken all the doubt out of it. Because doubt is like a little crack in a dam. It doesn't matter how big the dam is. A little crack can open up, because water will always find those openings. And so if that's your mindset, then say yes now, learn from it. And this works even if you don't believe in it. It works even better if you do believe in it. So click on the icon that says offers, click on the blue button, and boom, you can go there and get registered. Now, Rich, back to you.
Alex, you said once you ring that bell, that's why we're so confident with the guarantee, that once you start using this in your life, whether it's personal, professional, you'll see the difference. You said believe in it. You can't not believe in it once you start doing it and see the results. I'm personally can tell you that from my relationship with my wife. When I joined John 13 years ago, I had already been married for, about 15, 16 years. It changed my marriage. It changed the way I talk to women and to men. It changed the way I talk to myself. It changed everything, whether it's in business or in my personal life. That's why we make that guarantee. We are that confident that it'll change your life.
Excellent. All right. Now, are there any more slides, or should we come back to Q&A now? Rich, where do you stand?
No, that's it. Q&A.
Okay.
Thank you for allowing me to do this, John.
Of course. We can turn off the slides, and then let's come back in with our video. John, come back in, and Rich, if you would as well. And in your chat, you can ask questions. There's a few questions that have come up, and John, one of the questions is if you're in let's say you're a woman, right? Sarah asked this. If you're a woman and it's a very masculine job, she's single, and she doesn't have anyone she can really trust or really rely on in the workplace. So she says she lives in testosterone land, right?
Yeah, I get it.
How to maintain her femininity and still live in testosterone land.
What happens is when you have a greater knowledge of how men and women are different, you now recognize I'm missing vitamin D. My personal life, it's my personal life where I can restore my estrogen, progesterone balance, oxytocin balance. And with a knowledge of what you're missing, you then have motivation. You know, this is like a real key thing. If you don't understand what you're needing and what you're missing, clearly, you don't have the motivation. And this will help you to motivate you to have more of a personal life that can enrich your estrogen production, understanding the dynamics of what can I do that would stimulate estrogen levels. Now, in my book, Beyond Mars and Venus, it's a lot. I talk about that. And in our program, we'll also be teaching you how you can generate estrogen in others, how you can generate estrogen in yourself. That's when you look at the dynamics of how men and women cope with stress differently. Women cope with stress differently by doing behaviors that allow them to come back to their female side. So you can't really look to your work at this point, the way you've described it, to come back to your female side. But if you anticipate a personal life which allows you to come back to your female side, the gift of being human is that just anticipating that, you start to generate those hormones. For example, if I anticipate success, my testosterone is produced before I even do anything. It's the anticipation of getting the kind of support that produces a particular hormone. For women, the anticipation of intimacy, the anticipation of doing something where you're getting what you need to be happy, doing things that you love, participating in groups, interacting with other women. These are all some of the few different things that stimulate estrogen in your life. Non-competitive activities, cooperative activities, nurturing activities, things that you enjoy doing. So you shift gears, and this is the simplify essence of how to come back to your female. Shift gears from what I have to do to what I enjoy doing. Shift gears from what I have to do to what I get to do. Shift gears from what I have to do to what I want to do. You see, whenever you're in the place of I get to, I want to, I love to, that's going to shift your gears over to more female hormones. And the anticipation of that generates it. And knowing that that's what you need gives you permission to create that, quote, self-nurturing time, me time, and so forth. And that's part of gender intelligence, to manage stress effectively. And we'll be talking about that in the class, Richard.
Yeah, because of gender intelligence, that question's ideal, because it's no longer a win-lose or lose-lose situation. It's win-win or no deal, as Dr. Stephen Covey used to say, who also belonged to the Transformational Leadership Council, like we both do. I got a question for Rich. I got one easy one and then one tough one. So I'm going to put Rich on the spot. Let's see how good he is. But at least I warned him, right? I warned him for the tough one. The tough one second. The easy one is, how is this training delivered? Are they webinars? Just take us through it so that we know as we move through it, get certified, and how do people change? So the delivery first, and then how do people change afterwards?
Well, first, the delivery is we would send you a manual immediately. We want to give you about a week to 10 days to study that manual, to get familiar with it, to really understand what they're going to learn. Once they've done that, they will then get 4 Zoom links It's all done on Zoom, where they log in, they'll see my screen. I'll be going slide by slide through that manual. It'll be very discussion based. It's going to be where they learn and then they implement. They learn and then they practice. They're going to write out what they would say in their particular instance. So it's a very interesting way of training, but all of our coaches have done this as well. Our coach training is online, but it's live. So it's not a pre-recorded thing we send you. It's open where everybody can ask questions and interact and be part of a discussion around how this applies to them.
Yeah, and the permanent change that's happening is you're not learning anything new. You're reminiscing about something you already knew, but just changing the way you do things. You can't sell hamburgers to vegetarians, and that's somehow between genders. It feels like, hey, I can't get this idea sold. You can. It's just understanding this in a different way. Is that correct, Rich?
Well, part of it, that's why we start with gender intelligence, is part of it is really understanding why. Like I mentioned earlier, the corpus callosum that connects the two hemispheres of the brain is actually larger in women. Well, that explains a lot. When women look at things, they see the bigger picture. Everything is connected to everything else. And every woman I've ever trained has agreed with me. Well, men, having less of that, only see the next step. What's next? They're not looking beyond that. And that's part of what irritates them. Is when a woman says, well, what about after that? Well, what about after that? He's not there in his head. She is. And he's got to understand that that's an advantage if he embraces that kind of thinking. And for her, it's an advantage if she embraces his kind of thinking. This stuff gets incorporated immediately once you learn it. So I disagree. They're going to learn things they did not know before. And why?
Okay, excellent.
Because I didn't know any of it before, and I didn't think, I thought I knew my wife well and my kids, but I didn't know any of this. And as soon as I started using it, it changed everything.
All right, now here's the tough question. Those of you watching, in the chat at the very top, there's an icon that says offers are along the side, but at the very top, there's a link that you can click. There's a yellow background, and there's a link that has Success Resources Virtual in it. You can click that to take a long, hard look at the offer and then make your decision. Remember, 30-day money-back guarantee means no risk and no cracks of doubt that are going to get in the way right now. It's never about the money. It's about priority. If I sold you Google shares, let's say $500 worth at the initial public offering, which was about $100, and you could sell it at the current price, you would come up with that $500 in a couple hours, right? So when you have a sure thing, it's never about the money. It's always about the priority. I'm just trying to show off in front of Rich right now and John. All right, now here's the big question, Rich. Okay, and this is not a fair question, but it just occurred to me, and maybe it's occurring to someone watching. So this course, the perspective from which the curriculum is written, because it is sales, which historically is masculine, although most of my salespeople are women. I do have a bias towards hiring women because they are just easier to train in my 25 years experience in sales training.
Easier to train.
I'm not trying to win over the men and lose them, win over the women and lose the men. That's what it's. I found that courses have their gender intelligence, since we're using that word as context. They do have a bias towards male or female. So how does this training increase estrogen for women and increase testosterone for men at the same time? There's your challenge.
I love that question. I thought you were going to give me a hard one.
Okay, well, go ahead. Now that we're doing our male,
I'll tell you how.
Let's do it.
Because as we go through all of these gender-sensitive touch points, and as we look at all the different parts of the brain, the slides will actually show different parts of the brain. The women will connect to that because we're going to be doing exactly what John said in introducing to a man and a woman. You want to be able to touch both of them at the same time. We'll be doing that in the training. And we want all the women to connect to the men in the class, and the men to when they learn this, to apply it in the class. So they're going to feel really good about oxytocin going up, estrogen going up. The men are going to feel accomplished. I'm achieving, I'm succeeding, and all of that builds their testosterone. Both get built at the same time while they're learning, because they're going to be doing it, not just listening to it. That's how.
All right, excellent. Great answer. John, I'm going to go to you now, unless you had something to add to that, because I'm going to ask you a similar question.
I was reading the questions, and I want to answer one of these questions, which is, do you think men's need for testosterone is changing, is getting less with men's evolution? Actually, men's need for estrogen is becoming more. It's like, I'm more family centered. I'm more caring towards my children, more family time, more enjoyment in my life. That is the estrogen side. But in order to sustain that increasing desire to feel love and open my heart and have family time and personal life instead of just being a work machine, my need for testosterone is even greater. That's the whole key here, is that, and that's why women can be amazing salespeople. Men can be amazing salespeople when they learn these technologies, but of how to motivate a woman. But women, when a woman is coming from a place of openness, she attracts. You see, we look at magazines to see women. Femininity is attractive. And when a woman uses her femininity, she can be the best salesperson ever, because she can provide for that man something his wife doesn't provide, which is a freshness of delight, appreciation. What a good idea. Oh, that makes sense. And so because there's that newness, she can tend to have no history with that man. So she's able to appreciate what he says, what he does, his questions, and so forth. And she radiates that, and men are looking for that so much that a woman responds to them that way. And so she has a much greater power to motivate men, and men have a much greater power to motivate women if they understand how women are different. But we don't understand it. We're over there trying to impress women the way we'd impress ourselves, the way we'd be impressed by a salesperson. And we completely miss the boat. Look what I can do, and I'll answer that, and I've got the answer here. And instead of like, whoa, slow it down. It's all about her. Listen to her, evaluate her. I understand. Well, help me understand that better. Well, what experience have you had with this? Were you disappointed in that situation? What are some of the concerns you might have? Getting women to express these different feelings allows her to bond with him. And so men are missing out completely, because see, women are now the purchasers. Women are part of the business world now, and men don't have a clue when it comes to selling to women, whereas women by nature know how to sell to men to a certain extent, because that's part of the dating process, which is not necessarily flirting, but being delighted by, well, what a good idea, and can you help me with this? And I think I can help you in this way. These are natural sort of dating relationship skills that to a certain extent women have already learned through years of trying to attract men into their lives. Well, that becomes a great sales technique. But also for women to sell to other women, it's very important that you don't use those techniques. So
exactly.
You got to turn that around. So anyway, there's certain advantages that you can utilize, but the men can have those same advantages if they understand the distinction between men and women when we're dealing with sales.
Okay, excellent. And then Rich, when does the training begin? Those questions are coming up as well.
August 8th would be our first class.
Okay.
And we would record them. So if somebody can't make it, we would obviously send that to them. And it'll be on a Saturday, and it'll be 4 in a row, 2 hours the following Saturday, 2 hours the following, and then we're going to add the bonus. You don't want to miss the why Mars and Venus collide, how men and women cope with stress differently. That would be the last one. So it'll be 4 consecutive weekends.
Excellent. And it is recorded. Although it's important to be there live, if you can't, relationship with women. And so that is a big bonus that wasn't discussed by Rich, but it's not cheating. Be our guest. It's there. It'll make you more intelligent learning it together. The worst thing is learning in a silo and then attempting to convince your partner, hey, this is really good stuff, and you could be watching it
That's true.
at the same time. It's like reading a book together. Right.
I'm so excited about this right now that, Rich, I'm just going to ask you something on the spot. But if somebody completes this class with you, would you, as the master coach, and I have to tell people when it comes to sales, Rich is a better salesperson than I am. As a teacher, I'm a good teacher coming up with these ideas, but he's the one who really gets people out there using it. And that's why we're a team. Would you be willing to discount your price in terms of personal coaching for people if they are maybe 3 coaching sessions, if they wish to do that? Would you discount your price for a 30-minute coaching session?
We can work something out. Yeah,
okay.
Because one thing that's important is, and you mentioned coaching before, Alex, and I don't want to make this about coaching, but one thing that coaches do is they get you to do what you should do. Kind of like a personal trainer at the gym. I go to the gym, I have a trainer there, and he gets me to do one more push-up, one more pull-up. He even gets me to go on the days I don't want to go. That's what a coach does. It brings you into implementing what you've learned, and that's critical. A lot of people say that knowledge is power. I personally don't believe that. I think it's potential power. Until you actually do it, does it become powerful? That's what we do as coaches.
Yeah, and this will teach you women selling women, men selling men, men selling women, women selling men. I mean, bottom line is...
And selling as a couple. And what about a committee? If you ever do a committee where you're presenting to 5 women and 5 men, you've got to be able to touch them both.
Yeah.
What do you do when you're leaving a voicemail? What do you do when you're texting somebody? Women respond to texting very differently than men.
And ultimately, you become happy when you take your eye off your own agenda. Because when it's all about your agenda, then you're missing a big piece. And this will get you in contact with that as well. This is yours for life. All right? You take it.
I just want to, Alex, what you said is so meaningful to me. It's something I hadn't even realized except in just that moment, is that with gender intelligence, it gives me a context in which everything becomes about the other person and not about me. I'm constantly searching for what's the most appropriate way to communicate my message to a person. Same thing as a parent. What's the most appropriate way, effective way for me to communicate what I'm saying to them, as opposed to just what I want to say, what makes sense to me. It literally turns your life around to where you're a happier person, because a happier person is always considering how to most effectively communicate to someone else, instead of just saying whatever I think and feel, and it's all about me. What a beautiful...
and John, that's what I meant when I said that gender intelligence goes into emotional intelligence.
Yes.
That's what I meant, is because you're turning it around and now being much more emotionally intelligent because of your gender intelligence.
Yes.
Yeah, and I was saying in a very subtle way, it reduces our level of narcissism, of only focusing on us. And if there is the short path to unhappiness, it is that. Because the points of my life when I've been the most happy, I focused it on me, whether it was after a divorce, a death of a friend or a family member. I'm focused on me, my loss, me. And really being happy and having the capability of being happier is turning my focus away and leaving my agenda and looking at others' agenda. And that's what the great spiritual trainers have done in the past, going back 3,000 and 5,000 years. So this is not just another sales training. This is bringing a new perspective. And one thing I don't believe in, John, is bursting through a comfort zone. I believe a training like this expands the comfort zone, because bursting through it is scary. It's scary. That's like no person's land, to be politically correct, right? But if you expand the comfort zone like a balloon, now you're comfortable with a more expanded capability and potential, and that's what this will do in less than 4 weeks. In fact, I'm going to recommend that after you go through it the first time, sure, you'll learn. but go back and listen to it and watch it again a second, because you won't be the same person you were after going through it a first time, and that will just accelerate your learning, even though it's the same material. Rich, would you advise that as well?
Yeah, I want to add to that, because I did see one of the questions. At the end of every class, where you have a 2-hour class, we're going to send every attendee a recording of that class. You can keep that in your computer. So, and the next week and the next week and the next week. So you will have access to this forever. And you are right. If you've ever read a book a second time, you don't see it the same way you did the first time you read it, because you now have the knowledge to see it a little differently. So not only would I recommend it, I would say at least every year you open it, listen to it again. Where am I in my gender intelligence? Another year, you'll see it differently every time. Yeah. So you will have access to it, and I would want you to use it.
Excellent.
Definitely.
I'll go to final comments, gentlemen. Thank you for spending your morning with us. We're going to close this, but in a moment, I will remind everyone that as your emotional intelligence increases, when you go back and you revisit this training, then it will take you to a higher level. So if you approached it at a level 3 for gender intelligence, okay, maybe you get to a 5 or a 6 after the first time, but if you're at a 6, you're not going to go back down to 5 or 4, right? Even if your memory isn't that good, it will change the way you think and feel, because it changes your entire perspective, where you're looking at a whole new world. It's looking at the same landscape with a new pair of eyes. That's what true discovery is. A French poet once said that. And so you can get to a level 10 faster, better, and easier for less than a dinner for 4 in most cities. And so take a closer look. Know that there's the 30-day money-back guarantee, where there is no issue with trust. You don't have to trust it. You get it, you experience it, and then if you're not delighted, then you have an opportunity to send it back. And we know that's not going to happen, but if it did, then it would be purely okay as this.
That's fine. That's fine. Because that's how confident we are that once you ring that bell, you can't unring it. Once you start using it and see how it changes your relationships, your life, your quality of life, your professional life, your business, everything.
Excellent. Well, remember that we still have one more squad. This is the relationship squad, and we have inner power squad coming up in the weeks to come. So stay tuned, because we will be continuing this, and hopefully we'll invite John back later on in the year for another Success Resources virtual event, because this has been eye-opening for me. This is the first time that I went to the second webinar as a host, and I'm honored that John invited me to do this with Rich. And Rich has been delighted getting to know you. I'm sure we'll get closer in the future. John, you got the final word before we go. What would you like to say to all as we finish it up?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Alex, very much for helping to put this all together. Rich, I want to thank you for taking my ideas, being the best student I have, who already accomplished in sales and teaching people how to be leaders and applying this into the workplace. I just so grateful. I could not do it without your help, and I can't do what you do. Actually, you are absolutely brilliant in that, and practically.
It's an honor, John.
Translating this for people to apply it in that place. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today with Success Resources. I look forward to doing more with Success Resources. We did some many years ago, and looks like we're going to be doing more together in the future. But particularly it's your positive responses that touch me. I appreciate all the likes and the love and what you've expressed today. I look forward to having you as a part of my life more. And sincerely from my heart to yours, I wish you great success in your work and growing in love in your life with your health and happiness as well. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well done, John. Stay safe. And Rich, final word from you.
I would say just join me in the classes. Let's take a chance to change your life. Join me. You won't regret it.
Okay, excellent.
Thanks again.
And both of you gentlemen can turn off the sound and the video, and I'll end with one comment. I want to thank not only John and Rich, but I do want to thank Jun Yoon, who is in charge of this particular division called Success Resources Virtual, along with Nikki Chang. And of course, Richard and Veronica Tan. Without them, without their confidence, without the money to make this possible, it would have never happened. Success Resources Virtual was born as a result of the lockdown. It was a pivot, and you've been a big part of it. I doubt this is your first event, and I doubt it'll be your final one. So make your decision. I'm here to push you so that the agony of the decision-making becomes so intense that you give us a yes, and you continue to learn on with Rich and with John Gray. We hope to have them back in the future. For right now, that's going to do it for me. You'll have about 10 minutes to continue with the decision, but show some love in the chat, because nothing is more fun for a trainer to read the nice comments and any of the positive feedback that you gave. And remember, if you go to successresourcesvirtual.com/feedback, many of you gave John your feedback. He is one of our highest rated trainers from the 30 that we pulled from so far. So that's why we brought him back here, and that's why we'll continue to bring him back in the future. So show some love in the chat. Stay safe. My day is about to begin. I think most of yours are ending. So thank you for joining us. I'm Alex Mondosian, and next time I will see you for the Inner Power Squad with Kim Kiyosaki and Veronica Tan, and Sandra Bravo will be with me then. So we will be here. I will be outnumbered 3-1, 3 women to 1 guy. I think those are good odds, and we'll see what happens then. All right. All good wishes, and be well. Bye-bye for now.
Em làm sao mà
As I said, if you want to show some love in the chat, please do so. I'm just reading your comments, and it's lighting me up. You're more than worth it for me to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning to do this. As you can see on your screen before the music comes on, this is not a recording. I'm still live. This is Alex Mondosian. You'll see that we have our Inner Power Squad coming on. So make sure you use the world clock, whether you're in Malaysia, in South Africa, in Germany, other parts of Europe, or the United States. And remember, join Telegram. We will have some very special offers on Telegram. And yours truly, Alex Mondosian, when all this is done, I'm going to do an Ask Alex Anything. It'll be a donation, a very small donation that will go to Success Resources scholarship fund for those who can't afford even to pay $15 to donate and watch something live. So your questions will be coming in. That's after the 10th squad, which is the Inner Power Squad. Right now, make your decision for the intelligence sales program, gender intelligence. I think that's a new term that you can use again. And you had John Gray and Rich Bernstein. I'm Alex Mondosian. Hopefully we'll get the music playing, and off we go.
làm được.